When I was the chairman of the company, we used to be chindi. We never used to spend money. I thought after I have left the chairmanship of RAI, at least abhi to paisa kharcha karenge. You know, he said chaat, papadi, chakna, champagne. Pani ke alawa kuch nahi hai yahan par. Yeah, so remember that. Anyhow, is there anybody who has joined HR function in the last 1 year for the first time? A young lady or a guy who has joined HR? Anybody here? Raise your hand. All seniors. Anybody who joined in the last 2 years? Somebody who's an employee. Last 2 years in HR. Last 3 years in HR. Yeah, I can see her. Come up. Come. Come. As we go, introduce yourself. What's your name? From where you have come? Which company have you joined?
I'm Yash Naik Navre. I'm from Reliance Retail. I joined it in 2021.
So you're 3 years old.
Just over 2 years.
So I'm going to invite you on the panel to join the panelists and sit next to your Mr. GRV. Come. Bosses come on these shows and panel में बैठ के सब बोल के चले जाते हैं. वो पीछे में रो में जो बैठे सब बोल रहे हैं. ऐसा कुछ नहीं होता कंपनी में. Okay? I think you'll have no issue in talking anything. No? I forgot your name. Yash. So be careful. Yeah, I know GRV for 25 years. Fabulous guy. Don't worry about it. Okay. Wonderful. A quick quiz. How was the gulab jamun? Why? None of you had gulab jamun? Okay. At least you are awake. You know what you ate. Yeah. I want to start this discussion with a statement. And this I heard from Mr. Sadhguru. You know, Sadhguru Vasudev, who runs the Isha Foundation. Long time back, we had gone to him and said, Sadhguru, we want to do a program for people. And we said, we're going to call this program ABCD for Human Resources. And he said, Nagesh, that's the biggest problem you have. He said, human is not a resource. The moment you look at human as a resource, then you'll say human is a capital, human is an asset. Assets depreciates as you grow old, and human appreciate as they grow old. Okay, so my first question to this panel, all of your HR heads, how would you react to this fact, Priya? Human is not a resource. You have a mic there. You can take a mic, I don't require.
So Nagesh, I was introduced as the head of people function, and in Titan, about 4 years back, this was one of the reasons we transitioned from being called an HR to people function. And the objective was really to say that, like you said, it's not resources, but also that the person who is sitting there also doing the gardening for your office is has the equal right to get the kind of attention from a function like ours. And that's why we transitioned from an HR to a people function. So in Titan, it's called a people function. But I think that one is about changing it from a HR to people function. But in spirit, it does take a lot to transition mindsets. Because it's not sitting just with HR to bring in this perspective. It's sitting with every manager. How does a manager look at people, right? And do they treat their people in an inclusive way? So I think one step would be about the function's name, but I would say that the spirit of it and the culture that needs to be transitioned, I think is much deeper. It has to start from the leader. The leader needs to speak that language, and that's when it flows down.
You think it is a fair thing? सब कुछ leader पे डाल देते हैं यार. वो बेचारा public होता है तो investor भी leader देखता है. Everything is on the leader. Why can't we start it from the bottom? Is there a possibility to do that?
Possibilities there, but if the leader is not going to be role modeling, then the bottom up doesn't happen, Nagesh. And I've seen enough and more of that.
So let me, GRP, ask you this question, big question. How do you role model the leader? How many times do you meet your leader, CEO, and teach him or talk to him about how to treat people in the organization? It's working.
This is working.
Yeah.
So how many times do I meet my leader?
And how do you really bring in the people thinking and saying, boss, human is not a resource. Look at them as a human. How do you really make your leader go through this whole modeling?
See, I think I'm just collecting my thoughts.
Please go ahead.
See, I'll answer your first question first. The whole debate of whether it should be called human resource or people management or whatever the other fancy names also floating around, I think to an extent these are all issues of nomenclature and they are kind of meaningless, okay? Because the definition of a resource is basically, in my limited knowledge, is coming from the base economic theory saying that there are only two resources in the world, money and people, okay? And the money and people, there's a distinct difference that money is 2 plus 2 is 4, but people 2 plus 2 could be 2.2, 1, 22 or whatever you can make out, okay? And that is where really the difference between these two types of resources happen, and there are only two types of resources in this world. As long as you identify with this thought, whether you call yourself HR or people is irrelevant. But when you twist this definition and start thinking about resource as another economic commodity, and you start defining it in terms of efficiency and effectiveness, saying that are you using the right person at the right job, are you getting the maximum output of that, that is when you start twisting that human being through a ringer to try to get the maximum out of it. And that is where sometimes you falter and then you start treating a human being as a resource. That is what you need to be careful
Fabulous.
about.
Very well. Dil dhadakna chahiye.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a simple.
So
you
that
have a
is
different opinion of what they are saying? You're part of that human team as a resource.
I think I can disagree here and I won't be judged on the same parameters as them because I am new.
The recordings we'll keep it and send it to the big boss.
Right.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so you mentioned that human beings should not be treated as an asset, but I think the definition of asset is, like you said, depreciates. But what if we look at asset, something like an intellectual property, that's also an asset, and it's not actually an asset unless you use it to get something implemented. So if you treat human resources also, as sir mentioned about resource wala part through economics, what if the asset wala part we focus on, and we think that human being is an asset like an intellectual property, which if nourished, nurtured, and given this right kind of environment, will be able to get the best output in the ecosystem.
Wonderful. Tell me what happened in your mind when you raised your hand and I called you here.
Like, do I fit the eligibility criteria of 2 years or 3 years? That's it.
This is it. You know, one of the things I want to recommend to REI is that have a panel, which is panel of only HR people who are just 2-3 years. I think it's important for us to start looking at fresh thinking. अगर मैं वहाँ बैठा होता आज से 25 साल पहले और ऐसे कॉन्फ्रेंस में कोई मुझे वहाँ से उठाता ना तो मेरी तो but look at the conference. Fabulous. So let's move from this human is not a resource to human people, whatever it is. Mukta, what's happening to the HR, the people function in the industry as we are talking now? We have come out of COVID, दुनिया बदल रही है, हम बदल रहे हैं, but actually function में हो क्या रहा है?
Function भी बदल ही रहा है.
हाँ, क्या बदल रहा है?
So I think we were just having conversation over lunch as well. How we've seen the retail industry for so many years is visibly looking and feeling different. And the challenge around people is also becoming very real. Especially in the retail industry, there's such a diverse group of people that work and support this industry, right? There are people in the front line as sales associate. There are people who are supporting the tech transformation and the e-commerce journey. So there's a huge spectrum of skills and variety of people with very different needs, adding to the complexity that sits with us as owners of human resources or people or assets or whatever we call them, to say, how do you want to keep driving them or connecting them to that purpose? How do you bring that purpose to life? And then how do you make your culture a center of that purpose and what you deliver every day? And that has challenged each one of us, I'm sure, and keeping us on our toes to say, what is it that we need to think about to drive that, right? Sometimes it's hard to find that purpose in a retail organization, right? It's you know, you're basically selling stuff. And there are conflicting views coming to the table as well. So for example, we are in the business of fashion retail, and how the world is looking at making fashion sustainable is also now a priority. So different thought process, different mindsets, diversity of just the sheer skills and expectations. The world has become so complex that the HR teams today are continuously grappling with how do you keep redefining themselves so that the organization can also keep redefining itself to where that future is, and that future has become so vast and varied and ambiguous as well.
So let me move to Adhir. The question, she used the word purpose. Okay, a lot of youngsters today say we want to join an organization where there's a purpose. अभी आज से 5 साल पहले किसी ने पर्पस नाम ही नहीं सुना, क्योंकि सडनली लास्ट 5 years all पर्पस पर्पस पर्पस. यार we have I have spent 42 years working, but I have survived 42 years without knowing the word purpose. कहीं दिल में था, दिमाग में था. When this happens, how do you look at purpose? Because there was a CEO panel and I asked a question on purpose and DEI, and सब घुमा दिया CEO ने सब मेरे को. There's nobody here, na? Okay. So how do you look at purpose?
It's a very difficult one. I think there have been attempts made in organizations to actually define this, but not everyone is successful at it. But if organizations which get this right in terms of aligning the purpose of the founder and the management teams, I think they are organizations which will actually encourage people to join and kind of flourish within their organization. But I think, Nagesh, to be very frank and very fair with the question and what you've raised, it's not something which comes easily for organizations. And I think it's not something that can be created in just a jiffy in a workshop or in a mode of this kind, but it requires a deep thinking in terms of why we exist in the first place as an organization. What's the meaning for my existence? That is very deep and very profound. And if you don't have the maturity of the leadership to actually do kind of dwell on some of these topics, I think it will be kind of a hogwash. So I mean, I'm being very frank with you. And not all organizations are at leadership matured in that sense across the spectrum of not just retail but various organizations. So I think it's a very deeper question for existence and the meaning that we want to exist, and what is my core meaning that I want to exist for as an organization. So that's something not many organizations have really found. I think one of the CEOs said, my purpose is to just make money. So be it. But that's not necessarily the one thing that you would want to do. But people are on the journey, Nagesh. I think a lot of organizations, when I read literature, when I actually go and talk to people and colleagues of this kind, they mention that there is some awakening around this issue of purpose. And I think we are really taking hard calls on purpose, culture, and values, and why do we exist, and why should we actually, what should we be looked at from an outside-in perspective. I think there is a sense that people are actually reflecting on some of these things. But I think in corporate India, I'm not sure that everyone across the spectrum has found that right, the kind of sweet spot, so to speak. But as you rightly also said, that 5 years earlier, no one was even aware of this. But if you have one, and if you are able to articulate that very crystal clear, and you are able to kind of rally your entire population around, I think there is a different chemistry that will develop over a period of time. And that's which is very important. And if you're not able to do that, you can still exist and flourish. But I think the kind of energy, the chemistry with people that will develop is just phenomenal, very different level. So therefore, that true differentiation that you will bring forth from a people perspective is when what you talk, what you actually want to preach, you will start talking and kind of help it cascade down across all levels. I personally feel the chemistry is very, very different at that particular point. That's my frank view.
Tanuja, you have a different opinion on the purpose. It's working.
So, Nagesh, I think when people join, when they are a little 1 or 2 years of experience, at that point in time, at least when we were getting into the industry, purpose of the organization was not important, correct? But now when I see the entire stickiness in an organization is only dependent on the purpose in terms of what is it that the organization wants and are my principles aligned to it. If I talk about us as an organization, I think there are 2-3 core values, like you were talking to some of the panelists in terms of culture, correct? I personally feel it is very difficult to build a culture which is bottom up. Culture has to be built top down, correct? Because if the leader doesn't believe in it, there is no way the people sitting here can drive that culture. So I'm saying, if there is no purpose in terms of sustainability, diversity you were talking about, a lot of other purposes which I am able to align with, and I think those are the core things that make people stay within an organization. So it's very important is what I feel.
Also, I think things have changed in the last 5-10 years because
Yes.
as retailers, we were serving customers, and customers were part of the community. The community never owned us. We were still a dukandar for them. I think from the social media, e-commerce, digital commerce, the community has started owning us, and therefore they have some demand other than the product. So therefore they are asking, "Tum kar kya rahe ho?" Okay, and there is an intermingling of the community and the organization. Okay, and like somebody in the morning was saying that we are the community which serves the community as community of people. Harsh, she said culture. Okay, complicated word, and she also said culture has to come from leader. Okay, HR plays a very important role in culture building because leader has his own style of doing things. But so just help me or help the audience on purpose, culture, and the role of HR professionals like you in helping the CEO build a culture.
So my view, I mean, I'll just start with the purpose, and I think what what was said was probably very just hit the nail on the head. So purpose is basically why you exist. I think everybody, every company, every employee, or every human being, we have our own answers. Probably sometimes you can verbalize, sometimes you can't verbalize. So that's the purpose to me. Culture is, when several people coming together, when there is, when you have from the top, there is certain, vision or certain way in which you need to go and certain ways of working, that's the culture. Now, the role of HR here is, I would say twofolds. A, how do you get, first of all, how do you define culture? Because it's so soft. And, these are seen in some examples, for example, the way somebody speaks to somebody, the ways your policies are there. So culture is not something which is, you can touch and feel, very tangible. It's what a person perceives. I might say that my culture is XYZ and a great culture, but that's not important. How your employee sees your culture is what is important. And that is why, and that is where the role of HR comes in terms of how do you translate that, how do you kind of break it down into smaller pieces so that it is visible and it is demonstrable to the last employee standing. I think that's to me is a
So
key.
two thoughts come to my mind, and this was part of some conference I was. One is I was interviewing Mr. Narayan Murthy, and I asked him the question that Infosys has grown into multi-billion organization. Everybody has grown below you, but how does Mr. Narayan Murthy train himself to grow? Okay, and he answered and said the only way to do that is feedback. Okay, so I just want to, maybe any one of you can comment on saying, what is the feedback mechanism in the organization to take the feedback from the lowest level to the highest level? Because in most cases, CEOs send everybody for training. Very rarely I found a CHRO sending CEO for training. Okay, I don't know how many of you have actually sent your CEO for training. Okay, Harvard Business School, Stanford 6-month class, I'm not talking of that. I'm talking of, say, boss, आप में ये कमी है और इसके लिए आपको वहाँ जाना पड़ेगा. Okay, I'm talking of that kind because that's how the culture gets built. So tell me any examples of down to up culture building. Okay, and I want to give one more example and maybe one of you can take. I was also sitting in an audience like this, and Mr. Ratan Tata was being interviewed by, I don't know how many of you have heard of Ravi Venkatesh, the ex-chairman of Microsoft. So he asked a very pertinent question. Tatas, you have thousands of companies. Okay, how do you decide which company, which business to get in? Complicated question to ask to Mr. Ratan Tata. You know what he said? Whatever is good for the business and the community, whatever is good for the community is good for Tatas. Can you have a bigger purpose statement than this? What is good for the community is good for the Tata. So I'm saying, so easily he converted a purpose statement. So I just want to spend 1 or 2 minutes, any one of you can pick it up, on feedback down to up, going up to the CEO and making the CEO listen to the feedback and changing himself.
Sure.
You want to take a name, you can take the name, but otherwise also okay.
Sure. So I'll share a little bit about what we do. So we've There are formal ways to do this as well as informal ways to do it. The formal ways are, of course, your employee engagement survey, anonymous, but we also do something called coffee meetups, where people, say the top 2 to 3 layers of, in the organization, will just go to stores, spend some time, do a quick huddle on the shop floor, as well as, do it across regions, etc. A lot of those inputs then are facilitated by the HR team to say, okay, what are we hearing from people, and kind of put an action plan around it, the whole framework. But other than that, there are various other ways in which, formal ways is, again, we have our managing directors, Ritesh Mishra, so Right to Ritesh, and different kind of initiatives that are there. But I think the most important one is when we travel to the stores, and we join a briefing session that's happening through the store manager. It is in that moment that you create a safe space for people to speak up. And it is so clearly linked to the culture, where we open the conversation by saying this is a safe space, we are a listening organization, and we believe in two-way transparent communication. So I think while there are various channels and frameworks that can be put in place, I think a lot of it boils down to the culture, and then ensuring how do you kind of report it out and program manage it a little bit.
And ask questions then?
Combination. It's actually personality trait. Once the safe space and culture is there, then it's an individual personality trait that some people will find the confidence to speak up, some will not. And that's where you allow for people to be able to share anonymously through other platforms if they can't speak in person.
Go ahead.
I'll just add
Then
something.
I'll go to Adhir.
Yeah. While there are informal mechanisms, I think what we do at Big Basket is we do employee satisfaction surveys both for our white-collared and our blue-collared workforce. And Nagesh, it will be surprising that they actually, if you read the verbatims other than the questions, they are quite vocal to express, because they have the confidence that this is going to be anonymous. And they share their feedback, and I think people only share feedback when they realize that you are going to act on it. So if you consistently act on that feedback, then they have the faith and trust on you, and then they start sharing feedback more freely. What we also do is, we were talking about culture, and culture for me is how my manager behaves with me, for each employee. So what we do is, if we are driving that culture right, what my team feels about me is very important, because I can easily mask myself to my bosses, correct? So we do this manager feedback very, very religiously, again anonymous. The managers don't know who has given what feedback. And that has really helped us ensure that the managers are driving and believing the culture, and that they treat their teams well in alignment to what we want them to treat. I think these are the few things that have really helped us.
Very good. Adhir, you had a... And then
I think one of the things that has happened in this case in Raymond, for example, is that, of course, the culture of town hall has become all pervasive. And I think we have made a significant departure in the way we organize that. I can recollect very clearly in the first couple of years that I joined this organization, we had a system where there were drop boxes for questions, this, that, the other. But we actually said, if you want to be a very transparent and an organization which is not going to be reactive to some of these questions and not going to be actually pushing people hard, we made these very open sessions. And today, all my organizations across retail, other businesses as well, they have town halls which have open questions, which are raised to CEOs directly. And I must say that the shift I can see personally in an organization, that we are taking feedback right from the grassroots today, and which is actually helping us to work on some of the things which we probably thus far would not have been recognizing. Also, there are formal mechanisms which exist, the 360s which are there, which are reinitiated, the engagement pieces. But I think the significant departure for a legacy organization, and mind you, I'm specifically using the word legacy organization, is that when CEOs walk the talk and they actually start encouraging dialogue with employees in an open fashion, I think you are trying to change the culture for the better. And I think that's kind of significant change I personally seen. Also, as you mentioned, some of the CEOs are also encouraging very one-on-one coffee sessions, etc., which have become part of the routine of some of the CEO within the organization. Ours is a conglomerate, it's not just retail. I'm just giving a larger picture. So some of the CEOs who've joined lately, who've come with different ideas and different kind of leanings towards this, they've really opened up the game in terms of actually seeking feedback in open forums, as well as closed doors on one-on-one, which is even lower than N-4, N-3 levels, which is a heartening part from a perspective of, and our organization better than I do probably, Nagesh, right? So that's where I'm saying there's a shift in gear shift in the kind of approach that one is practicing or one has actually started institutionalizing as a process?
Yep, wonderful. Priya,
I'd like to
if
share
I-
something here.
Sorry.
can I just,
Sorry.
yeah, Priya, can you finish?
So I wanted to share on the culture building, Nagesh, there is this entire platform called Tell Me, which is run by Venkatesh MD. From Jan to July, he actually does, he goes across the country, including our factories in Pantnagar, Roorkee, all across locations. And he meets groups of about 8 to 10 employees only. And each one is given about a couple of minutes to just speak whatever they want to. And this has now been in practice for 3 years. And obviously, every time he goes and meets and comes in, we have a list of things to do as well that comes in. And he also meets housekeeping, he meets security. And I want to share something that took place after he met them. So, as you know, as an extension of that whole people centricity, one of the things that shifts that took place is in our cafeterias. First, it's the housekeeping, the security that has the food, and then the rest of the employees have it. Now, that's something that came as a conversation that he had with them, and where somebody shared about how they feel that they're treated, right? And these conversations actually have led to at least every year he does it, it comes to about 350 to 400 action items that come out, including he is mandated in every store, just like how in airlines you have a 10 by 10 or a 20 by 20 restroom, right? Because women spoke about UTI problems, the fact that in retail, you know, to get the retail space and the real estate is so expensive. And then he mandated that every store must have a restroom, without which we will not open a store, right? And existing stores go back and check where the feasibility is there for that to happen. So the culture, and that's why I said it has to be top down. So just naming a function does not make the difference. He has to be there and listen to them, and that's when it becomes a people function.
JRV, and then come to
You,
Harsh.
you mentioned a word called training at the leadership level, and I just had a comment on that in terms of saying that training doesn't work at that level. And when we realize that, and this is a realization I'm sure all of us share, we have flipped the coin, and we said that at that level, basically the flip in behavior will happen when there's a lot of self-awareness. And how do you generate that self-awareness is a journey that we have, you know, kind of started over the last couple of years through a wonderful science called coaching. So what we've done now in Reliance Retail over the last 3 years or so is that we are doing coaching of different levels means different types in different levels of the organization. So really at the real top, we get external coaches who are professional coaches trained to work one-on-one with the leaders to help them self-reflect. Coaching nothing about, you know, giving them additional functional gyan because they are already experts in that area, is to reflect in terms of how they behave. And the next level, we have close to around 1,200 people who are certified coaches today in the organization with the help of CFI and ICF. And so that's the journey we have incorporated. Even at his level, we are now doing coaching, you know, familiarization sessions and how to kind of pick up those nuances of coaching. So I just want to share with the forum here, saying that could be one of the ways, because culture, very crudely put, is something what you do when no one is watching. Okay. So, and that comes only in terms of what your inherent values and beliefs and those systems are. Yeah.
And retail, if you're on the floor, everybody is watching you. Yeah, so that's a danger there.
But
Yeah,
apart,
you had a
apart
point.
from that, we have the standard, so to say, to employee sat surveys, and we get mails written by associates right to Mr. Ambani and Prabhakar. Here is my friend. We all get into a tizzy. We have to solve them. There are dashboards, right? So all those kind of things are there. But I thought this one was an
Mostly
interesting thing.
anonymous लिखते हैं या नाम से लिखते हैं?
नहीं, नाम से भी लिखते हैं. And that's a really good reflection on what kind of confidence that people have, right?
Yeah. Harsh.
So I've got one interesting example of how, you know, one of the CEOs in my previous organizations made, you know, use the technology to make sure, you know, he understands the pulse and what's important. So we used to have these global town halls, 10,000, 20,000 people dialing in. At the end, then it was open. So people first they said, okay, you speak out and you ask your questions. People are not, I mean, they're uncomfortable. How do you ask that question? 10,000 people. Then we said, okay, you put your questions in the chat box, and then, the CEO will answer. But then, again, the fastest finger first, somebody gets a chance. You don't know what's important, what's not important. So this person, in one of the town halls, they use the technology and they said, every question which is asked by the participant will get upvoted or downvoted using a technology. So you suddenly see a question and 500 people say, give a thumbs up. And let's say 100 people give a thumbs down. So your score is 400. And then you come to the top question. So that's the question that is bothering most of your employees. And that's what you answer first.
Fabulous. Adhir, I've got a hint from you. Is there anybody who is bothered about the way the whole function works here and want to ask a question? Anybody who's, yes please. Request is only question, no statement or paragraphs. Yeah? Yeah, go ahead, it's on. What happened, the mic? Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
The question is that you said that your CEO goes to the various stores and you have, once he comes back and you have a list of 250 in action points. The question is that, is it to only HR or is it to other
it's
functions?
to businesses to see.
Yeah.
In fact, there will be very less percentage, I would say, for HR. For example, there could also be about, the sales pressures. A lot sometimes comes on the way the targets are set or the sales pressure which is there. So it's not just for HR, it's for the entire organization. And it doesn't happen, by the way, after he comes. It's real time. So he finishes a meeting, it goes in, and we have a digital platform that really helps us to manage that.
Yes. If Mr. Mani calls me right now and GRV saying, make Yash the head of HR. just imagine, huh? He just calls GRV and say, make him the head of HR because इतने बड़े महारथियों के साथ में बैठा था तो कुछ तो ज्ञान हुआ होगा. What are the two things, not in Reliance, but 1, 2, 3 things you would like to change in the industry? By the way, whispered, GRV whispered, I'll be so happy.
Okay, first thing I have is that probably meritocracy across the organization, which one thing I feel is in India systematically because of the kind of culture that we have, it's like tenure and age is given a lot of importance. So one thing which I feel maybe because of the Gen Z vibes is that that should not be the only criteria on the basis of which you, at least in corporate sector, in bureaucracy, in army, I understand that tenure is important. So that is one thing. Second aspect in the, okay, I think you will like it a lot, which is more on the lines of the question you asked in the morning, which is like, make it a mandate to hire, say, differently abled or say women who are having a second chance or something on those lines. Because unless a mandate comes from the top or maybe from the government, it won't happen from within. So if a mandate like 5%, like CSR, for example, ever since it's a mandate, you get to see the numbers are happening. Nobody stopped the corporates from doing it a decade ago, but now it has happened. So maybe that kind of a mandate, maybe by a forum or something would really help. That's second. Third, abhi aane rahe.
Okay, दो बहुत है यार. There are backbenchers who are laughing, but nobody is clapping. यार. एक बार जोर से हो जाए. You should get a feeling कि clap दिल से निकल रहा है, हाथ से नहीं निकल रहा है. Yeah. Okay. Again, to all the panelists, COVID came, COVID went off. We were talking of work from home, all those things. Is there a way that you all started looking at people, their performance and productivity when it is partly work from home, partly from office? Let's not forget in retail, 90% of the people work never from home. Yeah, and their only grudge is this. I don't know whether anyone of you have gone into a 5-day, Starbucks has gone into 5-day for the front end. But this whole thing about saying हम 7 दिन काम करते हैं, ये 5 दिन काम करते हैं. Okay, हमारा कस्टमर 5 और 10 के बीच में आता है, ये लोग 6 बजे घर चले आते हैं और हफ्ते में 2 दिन घर से काम करते हैं. These are real statements I'm actually telling you. This is the reality. Okay. So, is there any shift that's happened on measuring efficiency, performance, productivity? Are there new tools, or how are you looking this new set of way of working? Anyone can pick up, and all of you can join if you want.
I think shift definitely has happened. Not so much in terms of moving completely to a flex kind of a this thing, but I think there is an emerging alignment or emerging recognition that today's talent is seeking flexibility, and that is something which probably organizations of today and tomorrow will have to take note of, because gone are the days where you could say this is my way of working or go to the highway, which is not going to be holding true for many organizations which have not necessarily embraced technology and therefore not have flex systems operated. So that's a very critical mantle which will be dawning on leadership very, very soon, as already done. But somehow there is a hesitancy in terms of saying that, I'm not necessarily going hybrid and what have you. But typically the market will force, the consumers means my own clients or my customers who are going to join me as employees will force me to actually relook at some of these, I may say so, idiosyncrasies of leadership that, I may not operate in this fashion. And I think the market will force. The second thing is also the whole question of efficiency, etc., was a thing of people did raise questions when we are operating from home, etc. But I think what is a big learning out of that exercise is that we were not necessarily monitoring from minute to minute, hour to hour, but I think work was getting done very effectively. So the realization also happened that it's not necessary to clock those hours for efficiency sometimes. It's also the level of trust that you should have on your employee population for actually to deliver efficiency and effectiveness. Because I think at the end of the day, all are adults. We are not in a school regimented system, right? So people are adults. They know exactly their responsibility. If you have a system of performance to be monitored, a system which actually recognizes meritocracy, etc., through due recognition of efforts and to due recognition of results and outcome based, I think things get in place, so to speak. So there is a shift. I personally find that at various levels that there's a shift towards recognition that things can be worked out differently. But I'm not saying today exactly that in all organizations it's a kind of embracement of wholehearted flex working, etc. Because I'll be fooling ourselves that everyone right from top to bottom is everyone agreed on this. But market is going to change and change very dramatically and force us to actually take calls which thus far we have never taken as organizations.
Priya, you had some thought? Tanuja, you want to say? Okay, go ahead. Then we'll go to GRV.
I think we are transitioning from an era where the number of hours spent vis-a-vis the outcome achieved now, because pandemic, we were not aware it's going to come and we suddenly overnight shifted to work from home. And that was the time when managers started struggling on how do I achieve productivity from my workforce that is completely remote. As an organization, what we've done is while we continued monitoring performance based on KPIs and multiple other things, but we are transitioning to an OKR methodology, which helps us monitor.
Sorry, what is OKR?
Objectives and key results.
Oh, sorry. Old school thoughts.
No
Sikna
problem.
padta.
Yeah. So how OKRs help us is instead of figuring out what each individual is doing, where are we in terms of achieving the overall vision of the organization? So it helps us keep the entire workforce intact in terms of achieving the overall vision. And then quarterly review helps us measure each individual's performance very objectively so that there is no haloing effect, recency effect at the end of the year. So I think with remote setting, it becomes very important that we are able to delegate tasks, measure it objectively on a regular basis. Otherwise, it will become very difficult to keep your workforce motivated. So that's what we have transitioned into. While there is a lot of discussion on whether work from home or work from office, I think we are in hybrid and moving to work from home.
Yeah,
So
before that, I want to ask you one question and maybe answer along with that. This whole work from home, anyone of you have done a spouse research? I think spouse research is very, very important. What do they say? I'm saying spouse, not wife. To say what happens when work from home. I want to go to the next step. Have you ever done a children's research? Have you ever done a mother and a mother-in-law research? There's a dynamic that's happening all around. Yeah,
Absolutely.
Yeah, let's go ahead.
So, exactly what Tanuja had mentioned. I must tell you, for Titan, we have multi-generational organization. It's not digital first. It's actually, brick and mortar first. So, just what others said, just to get the trust established, that work does happen when you are in remote as well, I think is a change by itself, which I would say it's still a journey for us, one. Second, we've in fact brought an OKR for some of our businesses which are very tech-led. So we have, the Titan Smart Labs where we built an OKR. But in the non-tech space, it's not been easy. And I want to see the person in front of me when the work is happening. It's still, I mean, to be honest, it's something that we still need to work around. And we do have offer reject ratios, because if organizations don't have the hybrid work model, if you don't have those policies, people are asking us those questions, do you have hybrid work policies? Can I work from home? Do I have those flexibilities? And if you don't give those, the offer rejects have actually gone up on account of that. So outcome based is the way we are moving. I mean, we're moving towards that, but I must state that the journey is slow.
I must also share, हमारे time में, I'm saying this because of this gray hair, इंटरव्यू लेते थे तो हम पूछते थे वो बोलते थे.
हाँ, correct.
आज के टाइम में वो पूछते हैं हम बोलते हैं
और हम दौड़ते हैं उनके पीछे.
समझ में नहीं आता कि क्या बोले उनको. That's the reality. You are saying something about
I have a slightly different take on this, and I'll also connect to one of your previous questions on purpose and young man's impatience on Gen Z anxieties and all that. Okay. Now the point is, I think whether you call it performance management or whatever you call it, I think the world has significantly changed over the last few years, and that has not only impacting retail, but in general, whatever we are seeing in India as an economy. If we are like the 5th largest economy today and will become 3rd largest in a few years or whatever, it signifies a humongous rate of activities which are happening in our economic ecosystem. And all of us are continuously running faster and faster to match up to that. And therefore, the performance measure is basically translating into a fact of success or failure in the business. We can adopt HR tools like OKR or whatever we can call it. At the end of the day, each one of us is on always on kind of a mode, because if we are not, then there's so much happening with all the young people starting their startups and this and that. Newer business models are coming up, newer tech enablements are coming up, newer ways of reaching to the customer is coming up. The customer is getting exposed to various different ways of interacting with you as well as the suppliers. So you have to continuously match up. So the whole point of performance management is now survival and thriving in the business. By survival, I mean it's just survive, but to thrive. The second question which I wanted to answer your purpose question is why that question was not there in your era, or it's more and more now, because simultaneously the choice also has increased. So when people have multiple opportunities to think about, then they start thinking about these questions. When you are in a PSU and you have one job where you have to retire from, I think you can think about purpose a lot, but then that's about it that you can reach. Today, you are in a situation that if your value systems and your purpose is not in consonance with what you see in the organization, you can make that choice to leave and join another company. And that is why all these things have become more and more important.
How many years in Reliance?
Close to 9 now.
Because somebody asked me this question, 32 years and you're still associated with the same brand. So suddenly, Harsh, you wanted to say something.
Yeah. So one thing that I've seen coming out of COVID is that there is from the managers or from the leadership, I think there is a greater realization about the personal side of employees, greater sensitivity, greater willingness to give flexibility, because we've all seen that in those 1 to whatever number of years, the work still got done in some fashion or the other, or by and large, it was there, it was done to the extent possible. So there is a realization, and there's a demonstrated evidence saying that the work can be done. You don't need to be in the 4 walls. So I think that is good. Talking about the retail industry, well, I mean, there is still touch and feel. There are stores, as you said, the 90% people are in the field. So yeah, going full hybrid or work from home is just going to be a dream. That's never going to be possible. However, from what I see, and I've come from the tech and the IT world, which was completely different. In my previous company, in the last 2 years, 2 times I went to the office. One was to collect my laptop, one was to give the laptop on the last day.
And how many years you were there?
2 years.
Oh, wow.
So I think, yeah, I mean, that's an extreme example, but I think what I'm seeing is that the leaders are, in the discussions that we're having, they are sensitive to the fact, even if it is not a formal hybrid work from home policy, but you're still, okay if somebody says that they have to drop their kid to the school or they have a parent-teacher meeting or a bank work. I think people are by and large, more okay than what they were 3 years back.
That's true. Mukta, you picked up the mic.
Working now? Yeah. So for us, we've been for the frontline 5 days a week for many, many years. And I think there came a point after the pandemic where we were starting to get questions from our store colleagues to say they feel the divide. That we were still hybrid in the office, in the corporate office, and stores were still doing full hours. And I think it's been a journey for us to acknowledge that given the talent landscape of today, that's a reality that we need to soft land with the colleagues and set the right expectations. Now, while we do that, I mean, there is no way, I think all of us acknowledge that talent is asking us that question during the hiring process. It's not us, the whole equation has changed. It's an employee market, not an employer market currently. How do we ensure that we allow for, these aspects to come together in a way that people don't feel left out? So we've taken a lot of measures to say we allow for a lot of, in fact, a lot of our store colleagues come into office roles. And in fact, one of the common reaction we now hear from them is, oh my God, working from home is even more difficult than working in a store. And putting those stories out from colleagues that people resonate with has helped us to kind of manage the communication or the divide that was starting to come as an emotion. So I think the reality with today's talent landscape is to allow for this, yet the sentiment has to be managed, and the colleagues speaking their own stories to say it's difficult to continuously work from home. I don't necessarily have the required setup, or the fact that, we're always switched on. None of us from office jobs can switch off, whereas when you're in a frontline 5-day job, you switch off when you leave the store. So I think just that sensitization is kind of helping us.
MNS is very close to France. England and France ज़्यादा दूर नहीं है. 5 बजे के बाद phone आता है. You can pick up.
Weekends
I thought the phones after 5 is bad. You have to pay penalty and all that. Yeah.
I had a problem once, which not in the retail industry, but in the technology industry. I mean, unmindful of the fact in India, I called at about 3 o'clock in Australia. He just said, we don't call it these hours. I mean, just period.
But India में होता तो क्या बोलते हैं? अच्छा बोल अधीर क्या बात है? Yeah, that happens. Okay, next 20 minutes we'll continue this, but we'll also take questions because this is supposed to be a studio. And studio is not for them to be sitting there and pictures being taken, बात कर सकते हैं. So keep your questions, raise your hand, and I'll keep coming in between. I have another question which has come up, and this is something new for me, but looks like it's a reality. I mean, in our times now, every time you have stressful working hours, you have challenges, your targets are met, not met, you have issues with people. But now this word of mental well-being is being really talked about, okay? And I think this started being talked about in the industry also. So in your opinion, anybody can pick this up. When this thing comes up of mental well-being, or a lot of youngsters, even oldies are talking of, I'm going through depression. Okay, how does one handle? I don't want all of you to answer, but if any one of you have really tackled this, okay, please do share about it, because I think this is a very, very important. Tanuja,
I think I have one experience which I can share currently in the organization that we are doing, recognize the same fact of mental well-being. I don't want to name the partner because I'm not trying to pitch in for them, but there is a helpline which is provided for counseling, as well as professional clinical psychologists are on the line to actually give counseling to people in need. And fortunately, not fortunately, I mean, I'm saying we don't track that's something which is barred. We don't know exactly who's going the lines. We only know the numbers. What my take is that after provision of this line, probably the increase in the avenues given were kind of leveraged by people. Because of the fact that we don't follow up, we don't know exactly how effective, etc. But I think there is a recognition of this fact that there is a need for employees to speak to someone beyond your official channels, etc. And that is something which has helped. In fact, I'm happy to share one instance where a person who was actually in a very serious mode, about to do something very, very dangerous to his life, got actually saved by this. So I'm really happy that even one person's life saved is just phenomenal.
Oh, yeah.
So I think there is a increased recognition of this fact, but it's not but still sometimes I feel even the employees do not leverage this so much because there's still a stigma attached to utilize these services. So I don't know, I don't have a way and a mechanism to kind of promote this. I mean, of course, we do the teasers and all the mechanism to utilize a campaign, but there are serious challenges that employees have, and in spite of provision of this kind of a helpline, I don't see much happening in terms of usage of that. So I'm at loggerheads to understand what else can be done to actually promote this.
I think we have to really look at how do we encourage this, because and many of you know that in TRAIN we had started an app called TRAIN Circle, and where we are connected to the Tata Institute of Social Sciences for counseling. Honestly, during the COVID, we had a few thousand, and many cases like this got saved, but immediately after that, it just dropped, and you would get 10, 12 calls, and you'll have 20 people who are sitting on the other side. So there is a challenge. You want to comment, Tanuja? We'll go to the next.
I wanted to exactly say what Adhir just mentioned. I think what pandemic did to us was we had never thought of, because we were all sitting at home, working in a different setting, a lot of other pressures. So we saw, and we have a similar helpline that Adhir just mentioned, and how pre-pandemic, I think we were focusing more on physical health, and post the pandemic, the number of mental health issues that have gone up, and we can see data also that I get at least from my organization. There have been multiple suicidal cases that we've been able to save thanks to that helpline. But like Adhir mentioned rightly, I think there is a big taboo right now for us as a culture to reach out to counselors. So again, I think it's the role for each one of us sitting here, our leaders, to talk about it more frequently. And Nagesh, I'll tell you, whenever we educate people, the very next month, we see higher usage of that helpline. And so that means repetitive education around that subject, talking about ourselves sometimes doesn't take it along that I use that service. It goes a very, very long way. I think as leaders, everyone sitting here should talk about it, shouldn't have any taboo associated to it, and people will start using it.
But
It'll
the
really
question is, do you require external stimuli?
Yes.
I mean, since the time the POSH Act came, okay, now everybody ensures that genuinely they do it, but even you have to tick the mark.
Yeah.
You say that, oh, I did the training, I did this. But on the mental well-being side, I don't think it is either an external stimuli, nor there's a recognition to say one has to really address
Correct.
this.
Still under the carpet. And just to add two things. One is that I think a lot of awareness needs to be built in the ecosystem that the employee is working, because that's where the first signal comes in. So we've used theater as actually a method to build even in the ecosystem. So we actually brought in cases where we show how if there is somebody who is lower engagement, absenteeism, not the way they used to engage earlier, there's a drop. What is it that you can do? And it's almost about, if you can reach out, you are saving a life. And we've had a lot of positive response basis that. And the second is that even the word counseling is not working, right? So we had to actually rebrand it, and we needed to do a lot of publicity around that. But the immediate ecosystem, I think, plays a big role, because that's where they spend 8 to 10 hours. In addition to that, there is one more wellness I think we should pay attention to, which is the whole financial prudence. I think there's a lot of the mental stress is coming because there is a lack of financial prudence that people are applying. And the financial wellness, and for people to know how to manage the finances, is another area I think we need to really educate them on.
Average Indian gaming hours, 3 hours, 50 minutes.
Agree.
3 hours, 50 minutes, average Indian gaming hours. अभी वो ऑफिस में करता, घर में करता, पता नहीं.
Despite the GST being increased.
Oh, GST has now happened, so we don't know what is the result. But whenever you talk to them, everybody says, no, I am game खेल रहा हूँ, I'm not gambling. Okay, but the gambling revenue was some $2 billion in India. So
I want to add that we had an employee who had a severe heart attack while he was driving, and the wife kept telling us that it's because of work pressure, because he was on the laptop throughout the night, right? And we were wondering, and he said no, he would say that he's sending emails, he's working, and then obviously it was work laptop, and we checked, it was all gaming.
How many of you game during the day or night? Look at this, not one. Huh? clap for these guys. All HR guys are really good. Huh? सब सुधरे हुए बंदे हैं. अलग से पूछूंगा तो सब बताएंगे कौन सा एनिमेशन, कौन सा गेम है. Sorry, you were saying something, Harsh. Yeah.
Yeah, so one thing that I want to add is the best way to encourage your employees to talk about the mental well-being or the stress or whatever is that the leader has to show their vulnerability. In our culture, the leader is always a macho. You always come as a as a strong man in the room, and you fill the entire room. And so everybody wants to then follow the same thing. The moment the leader shows that they also are vulnerable, it entirely opens up the gamut for people to genuinely talk about their issues and their problems without any fear or stigma.
Yeah. I don't know the question. Oh, you are, yes. You have the right. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I have 2 points here to make on the overall mental well-being perspective, and one of them is being actually practiced in our floor at Reliance. So first thing I feel as from a mental well-being perspective, if you just trace back, so what happens in an organization, supposing for someone who just joined new, is that you think it's all about work and nothing apart from that. So you are not comfortable sharing anything. So one of the ways to say alleviate mental, say mental stress can be just talking to anyone. It need not be the leaders only. So one aspect what I would like to focus is the community building aspect, which happens in Reliance a lot because of the campus mostly. Like there are several communities of people who would like to express themselves post work in say dance, swim, gym, anything like that. So firstly, when you find someone who's joined new and you know that that person likes to say go for a badminton match, so immediately that person connects, and apart from work you get a connect that I can bond with this person on a level which is not related to work. That is first aspect. And second, which the previous topic was about work from home and hybrid wala mode. So I had my thoughts on that, which was like an article was shared to me by GRB sir only, which was about why work from home is not beneficial for the society. And the crux of it was that, supposing imagine that RCP shuts down and people are continuing to work from home. What will happen to the economy of entire North Navi Mumbai region? The number of people, like 50,000 people are working in Reliance, their families come here, because of which the entire economy, the clubs, the cafes, the maids, everything survive. So from an economy perspective, a work from office environment is helpful, but take it to another level. Like what if it was a hybrid mode where I had a choice of working 1 week from the office and 1 week from someplace else? If that situation is actually realized, if it is possible for the job without loss of productivity, then probably the economy of that region also will prosper. The employee and the family, if they want, a family living in outskirts, you can go and meet your family. Another aspect to secure your well-being, your parents' health, anything of that sort. Third aspect is you get to travel. So like the change of environment is possible, that creates such a positive vibe. So like 1 week I'm working from Mumbai, next week I'm working from Ladakh. I come back to Mumbai, I feel so much fresh that I'll travel back to Ladakh after a quarter.
But tell me one thing. But do you tell GRV sir मैं लद्दाख से बोल रहा हूँ? हाँ? नहीं सच बताना. Do you say?
In my first stint as management trainee, when it was not work from office, I was traveling that way. Like I used to work in different locations.
So when I was talking to somebody in Zoom, he said यही problem था. लद्दाख से बात कर रहे थे, बॉस पकड़ लेता था. ये पीछे हिमालय दिख रहा है. तो he said we have now got screen savers. तो जो भी स्क्रीन दिखा दो घर में है ना, पीछे भगवान का मूर्ति लगा हुआ है and all that thing. Anyway, I have a question which I have to ask, which my team has asked me and said without that we will not allow you to enter the office. This is all about DEI. Okay, what can we do more to bring diversity, equity and inclusion in the industry? Okay, I'm not saying we are less, but I think we are one industry which has a huge opportunity. I mean, if 46 million people are working in retail, close to about 8-10 million in the modern retail, okay, I think there's a huge opportunity. Women's ratio is still low. Women, as you go up, I'm so fortunate I'm seeing 3 women in this panel, but it's just not there. So I'm sure each one of you must be tackling this unless you have a mandate, I don't know. But I definitely want this and give genuine answer which can help my team. Otherwise, मैं नहीं जा पाऊंगा वापस.
I'll start maybe. See, at some stage we are going to get to a maturity level where the D&I and all these things will come naturally to us. But in my opinion, it's going to be a few years, down the line. It's not going to be now. So one of the things, and as we speak, what we've done for this year is that we've taken a target. It's a target, it's a mandate that every store has to have one PWD, a small store, and a bigger store maybe more. So that's the way in which we are kick-starting the entire thing. In the years to come, it will be a natural choice. We don't have to force it. But at least I think my opinion, until we get to that stage, I think there has to be certain, KRAs, milestones to be put to push this entire thing.
So, go ahead.
So I feel it is I and D, inclusion and diversity. And I'll give you an example for Big Basket. While we have our own RM program and we are doing a lot of work around it, but every location is a different culture. If I talk about Pune region, and my Pune RHR is here today, we have 8.9% of the workforce with people with disabilities, which is a commendable number. While we've not been able to replicate that same number anywhere. So that means, and why that is working is because the business head and the HR team there believes in it. The environment is so inclusive. Everyone knows sign language. There are no communication gap. So to achieve this, to achieve a target, I think while we can set targets for ourselves, we have to figure out how do we create an inclusive environment. It can't be done over a night. I think it's a long, long journey. Whether we talk about gender, I think it will take a century to have 50% women in the workforce. But I think we as organizations should focus on inclusion. And I'm saying that because I have seen this working in Big Basket in different pockets and failing in the other pockets. So and we should take affirmative action. We've taken 20% for ourselves. We've not been able to achieve. That's a different thing. But while we continue to take those affirmative actions, how do we drive that inclusion? And if the group can help, I think we've been doing a lot of things at our front, but still we are struggling. We are 15% of women diversity. We are 3% of people with disabilities today, and we are struggling to take that number up beyond that.
Yeah. So one, it's a long journey, but if you don't mandate, that journey will not happen. I think the fact that board has to have women has brought in some shift, but it's not sufficient. In my view, the target should be taken at the top, not at the bottom. I think when we take an overall target of women as a percentage of the workforce, you will find that it gets burrowed at the bottom of the pyramid, right? But the leakage is actually happening in the mid, where there is an impact on the life stage, and above. So today we have 15% of our top, which includes the CEOs, we have 15% women, but our attempt is that how do we take that up to 25-30%? And in the top leadership, how do you bring more women? Because you bring more women there, I think the rest will be taken care of. And I agree with Tanuja that if you don't, and inclusion is not just about women. Inclusion is about, like he said, you have multi-generational workforce, you have multiple genders. Yeah. You know, now, in fact, POSH is not about just men, women. Yeah. You have multiple genders, and it is so important for us to focus on. So we've got communities within Titan where we've actually sent it voluntarily if people want to either recognize themselves with that community or at least call themselves as a supporter. So we've changed our policy. So in our insurance, you have sex change now. We brought in partners as part of the policies, right? So for us to be even become a brand of preference for the consumer tomorrow, if you don't till the ground today on the inclusion, we will be left behind in the journey, and we will have business loss because of that, because I don't think we'll be the preferred brand.
This is fabulous. Yeah. This requires a fabulous. Okay, we just have 2 minutes.
Just the last one, I think from our
30 seconds only.
Yeah, 30 seconds, absolutely. I think we are running something called a Shakti program for the last couple of years. I think this really started paying dividends. But I think I echo her sentiments if it doesn't come as a norm from the top. But I think with the advent of ESG norms, etc., which actually compel you to look at this, I think the leadership is standing up and taking notice of some of these aspects. And therefore, from a voluntary aspect or from an inclination for some of the few leaders, it's become a norm across the whole group. And I think I see a different change, but it has to also be reinforced by policy level changes to encourage these aspects as well.
Wonderful. So we are RAI and TRAIN. We're actually organizing a DEI summit sometime in December. If Kumar is there somewhere, I would request him to really see if we can get 10, 15, 20 CEOs and 10, 15, 20 CHROs, okay, who can really represent the industry and pledge to say this is what we'll do. And people like us in TRAIN and all of us will get together and really move a needle. I mean, even if we moved 0.25% every year, I think we would have made a big difference. Adhir, no more. There are lots of people.
Question to you, actually.
Question to me? Yes. That's not part of the agenda.
No. Not a question really, but I want a contribution from your side, because I've heard what Sadhguru said about resource versus response. For the benefit of everyone here, if you can actually articulate what response really means, that will be helpful.
No, response, he said, Responsibility is what he has defined very clearly. He says it is ability to respond to a situation is responsibility. That's the way it is defined. So unless each one of you has the ability to respond, and each person has a different way of responding. So it's a problem is when you write SOP and write responsibility, accountability as a charter, it doesn't work. But if you look at a situation, all our store employees, they react to situations with no SOPs. All our HO employees always look at SOPs before reacting to situations. So I think that's the difference with the way he looks at as responsibility. Okay, I think one or two hands I saw. There was a question as I was walking, there was somebody was asking saying, all this is nice, how do we execute it in the store? Or how do we execute it in the organization? But it's a very big chapter, so we won't take that up. Yeah, please go ahead, please. After this, we'll take two more questions. Yeah, one there, backbencher, and one more. Yeah, thank you. After that, you take on. So you have a mic in front.
Hi, my name is Pooja. My question is, so I'm going to put a few things together and ask one question.
Keep it very short.
Absolutely,
Short, yeah.
absolutely. Sometime back we spoke about whether CEOs need training and whether we have, any one of us have ever told them that they do. I think DEI or DNI as people call it is not a department or it's not a policy. I think it's a mindset. And I don't believe that the CEOs or even the top people in every company have that. So I was taking a workshop recently, all managers, senior managers and above. And I said, you know what? We're talking about so many things around and you're managing teams, but tomorrow your daughter or son comes back and says, Mama, you know, I have a crush, or Dad, you know, I have a crush. Will you actually ask him, is it a girl or boy? Or would you assume? I think that itself is something we need to ask ourselves. And I think it starts with the mindset, not with a department or a mandate.
In the next DEI panel when we have in December, get Pooja in. Yeah, because it was not a question, it was a statement, but you have to make it with intent.
Yeah, Pooja, just to add, we have actually introduced, there is a top line and a bottom line for the CEO. We've introduced a DI line also as part of their charter.
Awesome.
So they are actually assessed on all three lines.
Great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, please, go ahead.
Yes. So my name is Jaswinder and I'm from Reliance Retail.
My कितने लोग Reliance Retail से हो यहाँ पर?
I think
All of you are from Reliance Retail, raise your hand.
maybe we are the presenting partner, that's why.
तभी सभी लोग GRV sir के लिए clap कर रहे हैं.
So again, the question is open for any of the panelists. So I've seen this that, when we are seeing about nurturing human capital, so I see that when on the top positions, it's very scrutinized efforts that we take to, place people. We have 16 personalities, disc and everything, where we analyze personalities suitable for that particular role. So is that still going to be there, or as we're talking about nurturing human capital, and we will be open to, taking that every human has a potentially to get molded towards a position. So that's what my question is.
That's a good question, but I don't think there's so much of time. I'll take one more question. If somebody wants to answer, they'll answer. Please go ahead. अरे लिखा मोबाइल में prepare करके आए थे पहले से. It has to be spontaneous, इसीलिए. Go ahead. When you say staffing means the numbers.
Yeah, the staffing in terms of the staff.
Okay. What do you think about staffing and where do you think this will go? Yeah, GRV, यार सब उधर है, आप ही बता दो. The problem is if you say staffing will go 3 times, they'll say, sir, कल तो बात हुआ था 2.5 times का, अभी ज़्यादा हो गया. Yeah, please go ahead.
No, so this is it's a very broad question, I think, and it's a directional question. So worldwide, I think we are the largest employers and will continue to be so. I think new models are coming up. Some of them require larger workforces, some of them don't require, depending on the economics of the situation. So all in all, I think that this industry is going to be the flag bearer in terms of employment creation. I don't see it going away. The nature of employment is going to change dramatically. And what you will be expected to do the job is going to change dramatically, and that will bring in a lot of stress or effort on our part here and you and Amisha and everyone in terms of how do you make people capable for those kind of roles which are evolving.
Agreed, absolutely. Okay, that here showing time's up. Okay, but I said time's up, Bina. I want everybody to clap for this because that was real, genuine work. Thank you so much. It was wonderful. I mean, this can go on for hours together because wonderful panelists. The best part is they were so honest, they were so transparent, and they said what they had to say. And the best part, how many of you thought, यार मैंने हाथ उठाया होता तो मैं चेयर पे आता? किसी का भी ऐसा एस्पिरेशन नहीं था? हाँ? अच्छा, as an ex-chairman, I am going to have the next session right now, and I'm going to call 5 youngsters to come on it. Come on, who's going to raise the hand? 5 youngsters. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All the 5 wanted to come. Yash, you did it. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.